A leader's vitality and resilience is key when faced with challenging situations. Many leaders suffer from stress and overwhelm. Mandy Harvey will give us ways to heal trauma, improve your health, and counter overwhelm. Welcome to the Excellent Executive Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Katrina Burrus. And I was wondering if you've ever felt that your work has affected your health, your quality of life, and your relationships. Maybe you've had some kind of trauma that is seeping through your behavior at work and in your relationships. Let's find out by interviewing Mandy Harvey how you can be healed of any trauma in the past that is affecting your current day. Mandy, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
So define for us trauma.
Yes. So trauma can either be physical or emotional. There are specifically two types of trauma. There's acute trauma, which is essentially the emotional response that happens during or shortly after just a single event, maybe a car accident, for example. There's also chronic trauma, which is more long-term emotional responses that a person might experience from either prolonged or repeated distressing events that might span months or years. We see this often in our childhood experiences. If someone has experienced trauma as a child, that could have looked like emotional trauma, where perhaps you didn't feel like you were good enough at home. That could also have looked like something more serious, like abuse or neglect, or even divorce. Essentially, trauma really is an experience where you have gone through something so overwhelming that your body reacts to it in a very strong way that sets in motion kind of reactions in your nervous system.
So you integrate within your body this trauma that's passed in your childhood sometimes, and it seeps out into your everyday and affects your working environment as well.
Yes, it does. It can oftentimes feel so overwhelming to our bodies, to our psyche, that we look for outlets to either suppress or distract ourselves from that emotional pain. And the longer we do that, the more likely those are to kind of seep out into our outward experiences. And over time, at some point, they get so overwhelming or so distressing that we have no choice but to face them.
So give us some example where you see trauma showing up in someone's business life.
Yes.
How can you perceive it?
Absolutely. So this can show up as workaholism, perfectionism, maybe overachieving. This could also look like people pleasing or constantly doubting yourself or every choice you're making in your business. Maybe it's a struggle to attract new clients or new projects. Maybe there's fear coming up every time that you look at your bank account. Or it could even look like having a lack of boundaries with your time and energy. So you're constantly in this work mode, never having an opportunity to really tune in, support yourself in the ways you need to.
So how do you help these leaders that have workaholism? I think I've been a victim of that.
Yes.
Where you perfectionism, pleasing people. So it gets to the people that it begins to affect their health, I would imagine.
It does. Yes, absolutely. In this state, we are in a constant cycle of survival. Our nervous system is most likely into a kind of sympathetic arousal, meaning we're in the kind of fight or flight mode of our nervous system. We're in this state of survival. We're using a different part of our brain. And in this place, when we stay in that place for a very long time, it can erode the quality of our immune system. It can erode the quality of our health. And there's actually a really wonderful study that goes into this topic. It's called the ACEs study. It was a study done by the CDC and Kaiser Permanente. This was started in the mid 1990s with over 17,500 adults. And what they looked at was adverse childhood experiences from the ages of 0 to 18. And they defined 10 types of different ACEs that included things like parents separating or divorce, physical, sexual, emotional abuse, physical and emotional neglect, domestic violence, mental illness in the family, substance abuse, and incarceration by a family member. And essentially, they would have all of these participants in the study tally up how many of these ACEs, these adverse childhood experiences, they had experienced as a child. And then they also looked at their health as an adult. And what they found was pretty stunning. 67% of adults that had experienced at least one of these adverse childhood experiences, 67% of the study members had experienced at least one, and of those, 80% had experienced more. What they started to look at in terms of the connection between early childhood experiences and chronic health issues later in life was that if you have 4 or more ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, there was a relative risk of depression that was 4.5 times higher than someone who had 0. And a person with 6 or more had a reduced lifespan of over 20 years. They also found that research in this study that there was a 6-fold increased risk of chronic fatigue syndrome with ACEs. So when someone is in the state of workaholism and they're in the state of go, 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 the way we start to work on this and take a look at it and kind of assess where they're at is looking at their health issues. Oftentimes, the state of our nervous system really presents itself in terms of our chronic health state. So the way this can show up often is autoimmune conditions like lupus or type 1, or even something like IBS or allergies or asthma. These chronic health issues start to flare up the more that we're in a chronic state of stress. We might also see the chronic fatigue syndrome showing up. Maybe we wake up and we don't have the energy we just used to. And so it feels harder to get through the day, or it feels like a struggle to handle all of the stressors we used to be able to handle. And then that starts to become the sign of something bigger at play here. Our health becomes the place in which we start to look at it, but the root cause most often is something that may have set this stream of chronic stress in motion, often being something from childhood that felt traumatic to us in that moment in time, and is where we started to establish core beliefs that affect us today as adults.
Okay, so it could be the root cause is done in the childhood, but how do you help people to overcome? You can't redo their childhood. So what are your 5 steps to heal childhood trauma and improve their health?
Perfect. So the first one is always with, any lasting change begins with awareness. So the first step is really becoming an investigator and researcher of your own nervous system, first and foremost. Our nervous system is the key to helping us heal. So if we have chronic health issues and we only focus on, let's say, eating better or trying to get in more steps in the day, if our nervous system is still overwhelmed and in a state of stress, those patterns, those behaviors won't change it. So first and foremost, it begins with awareness. So taking a look at things like...
Okay, so just give you an example. Okay, so someone says, okay, I feel stressed, I feel overwhelmed at work, I feel tired when I come back from work. So they say, okay, I'm going to eat better, I'm going to do more sports, and it helps maybe a bit, but not really. So what do you do then?
Yes. Well, then we go back to more of a investigator of our own nervous system. So it's not necessarily the external things that are going to shift the health and the behaviors, although those are helpful. The first step really is understanding what state of your nervous system are you in right now.
So how do you get to know that? I mean, I don't know my state of nervous system.
You start asking questions of yourself, like, what does it generally feel like to be in your body? So throughout the day, asking yourself, how am I feeling in my body in this very moment? How am I feeling in my body when I'm in this meeting? How am I feeling in my body when I'm at home? How am I feeling in my body when I am activated or triggered or peaceful and calm? The more we start to tune in and ask questions that get to the root of our nervous system, the better we can start to understand what state we're in. So asking questions like, how often are you in a stressed state or in a sympathetic nervous system state? How often are you in a calm state? What helps you feel most like yourself? How do you respond when you're activated, or how do you respond and move through life when you're regulated? These become the questions and the places you start to tune in the first step of just awareness, understanding where you're at today before you make changes to your diet or add in more, physical activity. Start to ask these questions and start to better understand the state of your nervous system in this moment.
So awareness and taking stock of what you're feeling at what moment.
Yes.
And in what situation. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So now that you have that awareness, now you can start to support your body with more anti-inflammatory nourishment and movement and support resources for your nervous system. So from a dietary perspective, if we notice that we're in our sympathetic nervous system or we're stressed all the time, when it comes to supporting your body with nourishment, we have to focus on things that are going to feel less stressful. So as many opportunities as we can throughout the day, that might look like being really present when you are eating your food versus eating while you're in a meeting, taking, 5 minutes to just savor a few bites. While you're in that moment, you are lowering your stress and you're in the present moment. It starts to help to release some of that stress from your body. So it's finding opportunities throughout your day where you can lower your stress and be in the present moment. From a nourishment standpoint, step 2 is all about healing your gut. So there's a lot of talk about this here. That's a pretty common topic right now. But the reason for that is because up to 95% of your serotonin, your happy neurotransmitter, is created in your gut. So if you have lived in a state of chronic stress for a long period of time, there's a likelihood that your gut is in a state of dysfunction, meaning you may not be eating or digesting your food properly. So the way we start to heal our gut is 1, eating clean, nutritious food, removing foods that create stress from your body, things like excess sugar, things like any foods or items that you might be allergic to or sensitive to. Sometimes for people it's gluten, some for people it's dairy, just being really sensitive and starting to notice what types of foods actually make you feel good. Going back to those questions we just started with in terms of awareness, what foods make me feel energized versus which foods drain me, and making sure that you're incorporating those and being really consistent with that type of method that will start to heal your gut when you add in the clean food and remove the foods that create stress.
Are there other anti-inflammatory food that you would suggest to somebody to explore? For you said gluten, no sugar or less sugar.
Less sugar, less dairy. For some people, it's legumes create digestive dysfunction. It's very specific to the individual, but in general, I would say adding in more leafy greens. Leafy greens are going to be extremely anti-inflammatory. Adding in more variety. What I often see is when we get stressed, we tend to hone in on maybe 10 types of foods that we will rotate through, and it's kind of the same meal over and over again. Our gut really likes variety. So making sure we have variety in vegetables, variety in fruits. I tend to lean people towards eating the rainbow, meaning eating a vegetable or a fruit from every color of the rainbow every day. And as you are able to incorporate more of those, do that in each meal, making sure you have a variety of colors in every meal. These are anti-inflammatory methods or tools, and removing the gluten, the dairy, the sugar, those things will be extremely helpful.
Good. So that's great tips. And a variety of colors. So a variety of colors in vegetables and in fruit.
Yes, absolutely. I would also consider adding in things like probiotics or fermented foods like sauerkraut or kimchi, or even yogurts, if you can tolerate them, if you can tolerate the dairy. Those types of things will start to help rebalance the bacteria in the gut so that it is in a healthy state. and that will help repair and heal any dysfunction that might have occurred from the stress.
And digesting regularly, I suppose, is a symptom of good health.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So awareness, then you support your body with anti-inflammatory nourishment, being very present when you're eating, being in the moment, and finding those opportunities. Okay, so, and variety.
Variety, absolutely. Variety is the spice of life.
That's good. And so what other suggestions? Is that the next step?
Yeah, so the next one would be incorporating healing methods that help further reduce stress in your body and help any past emotional wounds or past traumas release. So this would be things like meditation or focused breathing exercises. These types of methods help to tell our cells to calm down and to relax. When our cells are calm, that trauma or those past emotional wounds can start to lift up and get out and release from our bodies. And then this would also include things like syncing up your left and your right sides of your brain. And the reason this is important is because trauma is stored in the right side of the brain. And when you do things like yoga or even a breathing practice called alternate nostril breathing, or any other exercise or activity where you're crossing the midline of your body, this helps to coordinate the left and the right hemispheres of the brain. And when we do this and we've had past trauma, this allows the trauma to move out of the right side of the brain and into the left side where we can process it and release it.
So right side is usually considered the creative side.
Yes.
So, and it's been stored there. And so the breathing, the meditation, synchronizing, I would like you to define that, sort of helps it shift from one side of the brain to the left side where you can intellectually process it. Yes. Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, that's right. So things like when you do yoga, for example, or, the alternate nostril breathing where you're using different sides of your nose even to breathe out of your nose, you're crossing this midline. So, when trauma is stored on the right side of the brain, and we haven't really been intentional or aware of it, perhaps, it tends to stay stuck there. And so the more activity we can do where we are using our physical body to cross the midline, so the center of our body, and using and engaging different sides of our body to relax it, what that does is it's creating a complete relaxation in the body where now we're kind of hijacking the brain in a way and helping that trauma move to where it needs to move so it can come and release.
What about sports? How could that help release the excess stress? Many people think that does release excess stress.
Yeah, I think it can be a very releasing type of modality. But the one thing I would kind of caution is if our nervous system has been kind of stuck in this chronic stress and we're essentially stuck in this pattern of like, go, 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 not really self-caring as much as we should for ourselves. And we're in a sport that repeats kind of those go, go, go patterns. We may not actually tap into the space within our body and within our brain to really cross that midline and coordinate both hemispheres to release it in the way that we would see if we were doing things that are more relaxing and more calming, like meditation or yoga or, intentional breathing practices.
Okay. So now you said the first process is the awareness. The second is to support your body and by eating better. And then the third is meditation. What's the fourth?
Yeah, the fourth is addressing your current relationships and support structures that you have. So science has shown that if you spend time with people who have a lot of trauma or they hold negative thoughts and beliefs or emotions, that your own brain and body will become entrained to theirs. And this will impact your ability to heal. So it's important to spend time with and build up a support structure of, family or friends or resources who can expose you to inspirational stories or resources or positive beliefs about healing that can help support you through your own healing journey.
Okay, so would you suggest that they find uplifting friends?
Yeah, absolutely. Join support groups or find groups online, or uplifting friends. I think we all are entrained enough in our nervous system to know when we're around someone who feels supportive to ourselves and to our nervous system. And we know what it feels like when we're around someone who doesn't feel supportive. So I would make sure that there's a strong support group around you to help uplift you, to help be a sounding board, and to help be a mirror of what's possible when you intentionally focus on your healing.
So, and a good gauge of that is some people give you energy and some people drain energy.
Yes, exactly. We don't want any energy vampires. That's what I refer to them as. You need people who are going to fill you up, especially if you're going to heal past traumas or emotional wounds. That can be heavy, and we need a support. We are born as kangaroos. We need someone there with us to kind of support us along the way. And that's true for when we start to heal our past wounds.
Great. And what is the last step of your process?
The last step would be if there is deeper wounds there than what maybe you were aware of or understood, then I would suggest looking at getting professional help, because just as we are all kind of biochemically different, we're also all psychologically different. So someone may be able to heal on their own. Maybe someone else needs some extra professional support with. So I would suggest looking at modalities and resources that help you tap into your body. Things like NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, or cognitive behavioral therapy, or somatic experiencing, or energy psychology, such as emotional freedom technique. But these are some things, some modalities that can help you go deeper into the healing process and help you move through it in a way that doesn't re-traumatize you.
So could you help people listening to you? What's the line? What would be a good indicator to go to a professional because it's bigger than what they can do about it?
Yeah, I would say if you grew up in a home where you experienced more perhaps emotional abuse or physical abuse, or there was neglect, meaning maybe you didn't have a parent there all the time and you were left to kind of grow up and take care of yourself, some of those can be really deeply embedded wounds that require more support. If you grew up in a home where you had parents there that, were as supportive as they could be, but maybe they just didn't know how to support you in your own unique ways, maybe that's easier for someone to process than perhaps experiencing physical or, emotional abuse repeatedly over time. So I would say if the trauma feels more like a big T trauma, which would be the more physical abuse, the neglect, then I would suggest, incorporating some professional support with that.
Thank you very much for your knowledge and your experience. And I think hopefully it'll be helpful for the people that are listening to this podcast. Thank you. We're coming to the end of our podcast. Where can people get a hold of you?
They can find me on Instagram at Mandy L. Harvey. They can also find me on Facebook at Mandy Harvey.
Good. And I'll have this on the show notes. Thank you, Mandy.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Excellent Executive Coaching Podcast. You can subscribe to all future podcasts at excellentexecutivecoaching.com. Join us each Wednesday to learn more about the latest trends in leadership techniques and bring your coaching to the next level. To learn more about Dr. Burrus' CEO Mastermind, use the contact form at excellentexecutivecoaching.com.